Are you a pro wrestling fan? Then odds are at some point in your life, you were a backyard wrestler. In this new series, I'm going to take you through how we came from this to this. It's a long story, covering nearly 2 decades. But if you're a nostalgic person missing the backyard days of yesteryear and a simpler time of the 90s and early 2000s, this is the story for you. This is Backyard Wrestling Cinema. Welcome to Backyard Wrestling Cinema Season 4, Episode 15. It's days after the blizzard of 2003, and the B4W was in the middle of our XWA invasion storyline. So much so that we had actually split the show. The first half hour was the B4W show, and the second half hour belonged to the XWA. Christian Greed, the owner of the XWA, came out first with Tommy Thunder, the XWA champion. And the idea was that their pay-per-view opponents, myself, the world champion, Denver Street, and TJ Money, the owner of the B4W, we wouldn't show up because they had stolen our clothes earlier in the show. And we came out wearing WNBA jerseys for some reason. Like it was the only clothes we could find. I don't know where we got them from or who brought them that day, but whatever. The idea was that they were making fun of us because were wearing WNBA jerseys, which valid point, even today. We would end up signing the contract for the pay-per-view. It would be me versus Tommy Thunder for the both world titles in a ladder match, and Christian Greed and TJ Money for complete ownership.
I didn't say anything.
Ain't that funny? Ain't that funny?
You might notice the belt in the background. This was one of the first replicas that were out back then. It was around 2002, 2003 that they started producing these replicas, or at least that's when we became aware of them. And one of our big goals was to have a real belt. And this was the first one, and we saved it for the perfect occasion. We had actually purchased it weeks before, but this was the first time it was being shown on camera, and the idea was that once the B4W and the XWA world titles were unified, that would be our new title. Next up, Homeboy Joe Slice, the United States champion, was out next, taking on a newcomer to B4W, Agent Bibbs, in a non-title match. Agent Bibbs had been to a couple of our shows beforehand, and we would do a little bit of training with the guys in the ring beforehand, just showing them how we did stuff. And it would take a couple weeks, and then we would eventually put people on TV because we had this habit of putting people on TV, putting them on storylines right away, and then they wouldn't show up the next week. So we implemented a new policy where they would come to a bunch of shows before they ever made it onto TV. And after every show, we would go to my ex-girlfriend's house and we would watch the show. And then a lot of times the guys would watch Monday Night Raw afterwards or whatever. But we would watch the show and we would all talk about what worked and, more importantly, in my opinion, what didn't work. I think you learn a lot more from what didn't work and what didn't get over and what's not right for the show. And typically the people voicing their opinions were the people who were there the longest. And Tommy Thunder, myself, had been there from day one. We were part of the original 4. And for whatever reason, Tommy Thunder was complaining about something, but he went on for a little bit long. And so we kind of wrapped up whatever his point was, and I don't recall what it was. And then Bibbles was there, and nobody was calling him Bibbles yet. And for whatever reason, he was like, I don't know. He had this kind of almost like a nasally voice. And he would say, I don't know what Tommy Thunder's point was with all that rambling, but I wish he would just stop crying like a bitch. And like, we had this sense of respect and like there was a way to do things, like much like you hear in WWF. Like Tommy Thunder was our Undertaker. He was like the guy to be respected because everybody knew that was my go-to guy. And he just had called Tommy Thunder a bitch. And Tommy Thunder, who's not ever short with words, couldn't fathom what had just happened. And trying to insult him back, he just spit out like I don't know what this guy's over here bibbling on, and we all just started laughing. So from then on, he became Bibbles, and then we had this character idea for an agent, a secret agent, and he would be Agent Bibbles going forward. That's the long story of how Agent Bibbles got his name. In the end, Mr. Benjamins came out and distracted Homeboy Joe Slice in what should have been a DQ technically. But nonetheless, it was allowed, and Bibbles was able to roll up Homeboy Joe Slice and get the shocking win in his debut match.
There's Mr. Benjamin! Oh, the slap of insults! He just spit on Homeboy! Wait a minute! 1, 2, 3! No way!
Next up, Mumbles would take on the hardcore champion, Rico DMF, in a hardcore match. This one really got started off in a Mumbles style as he hid behind the deck and blindly attacked Rico. It had all the ridiculous hardcore title spots that we did back then, stuff that just made us laugh. Hellspawn's music would eventually hit, and that distracted Rico DMF, which allowed Mumbles to roll up Rico and win the hardcore title.
Wait! Mumbles got the roll up! 1, 2, 3! Mumbles got the win! Champion!
Yeah, this belt,
Joe D of Misery and Rob Oblivious would take on Bobby Bowe on the XWA show. This was one of the first appearances of Joe D of Misery. He had been there a couple times when we were the HWF and maybe a couple times since we had been on TV, but this was his first match back.
Oh! Hey! Oh! Punishment! That could be it! Bow!
It's over, fellas.
What's he going? Huh? What? Oh, now he's going
bow and arrow.
The Bobby Bow and arrow. That should be it. The Bobby Bow and arrow.
Next up was the Money on a Pole match. Mr. Benjamin's the XWA Canadian champion would take on The Beast. In the end, Benjamin's wins and keeps his money.
Wait, does he got it? He's got the money right on top of the beast. Mr. Benjamin has won this one.
Afterwards, the Beast attacks him. Homeboy comes out to save his When Worlds Collide opponent, but Mr. Benjamin's lays out Homeboy Joe Slice for the second time that day. So much for being a good guy, Homeboy. See where it gets you?
Stop it! Wait, here's Homeboy. Wait, the Beast refusing help from Homeboy. Oh, that's not making Homeboy happy. God, kiss my Homeboy! The United States champion there. Wait a minute, Mr. Benjamin's is up now. Oh! Benjamizer! Oh my, that's twice today! Mr. Benjamin's has screwed over Homeboy.
We did a vignette where I found my clothes and TJ Money was pissed because I just left his alone in the car where I found mine, and our match was happening next.
You should be happy for me. Look at how great I look.
Tommy Thunder and the XWA owner Christian Greed are out first. TJ Money starts off the match without me since he was pissed about the clothes thing. Eventually, Greed and Thunder take over, and then I stroll on out there. Me and Tommy Thunder, the two champions, XWA B4W, went at it. At some point, he hit me with this metal pipe thing that we had been using the last couple weeks. I had an issue with my knee a few shows prior to that. And for some reason, it really screwed up my knee here, and he really didn't hit me that hard. I think it was just the way I was anticipating the move, and I bent it the wrong way. And the problem was we had planned all these spots around working on my knee during this match, and we didn't know enough back then to call an audible and change it. So I don't know how many of you out there have been in a figure 4, but it hurts. And that made it way worse. In the end, Tommy Thunder pinned me and TJ Money pinned Christian Greed, so nobody really knew who won the match.
Wait a minute. Oh! Out Greed. 1, 2, 3. Who's the winner?
Who won?
Who won the match?
My music.
Yes!
In all the confusion, Tommy Thunder knocked out TJ Money with the belt and held both titles above his head on the ladder on top of me to build up to When Worlds Collide, which would take place next week. Everything was on the line, all titles would be unified, and it takes place right here next time on Backyard Wrestling Cinema.
Work here by Greed and Thunder. Oh!
Not letting TJ Money have a second.
Oh, using the ice!
Oh my.
Oh,
That's cool.
oh, that's dragging us through the dirt. Homeboy's the best high flyer in the B4W. And that is why! Oh my god, that is beautiful!
Wait, took out his leg. Oh! Beautiful double teamwork.
He's just in the match because he wants to be.
And Spine Buster there by the beast. And he goes down as well. What force! Watch it, it's very slippery.